Welcome to the Valentino Show, the podcast for founders, investors, and entrepreneurs, where we have honest conversations about what it takes to grow your business, build more wealth, and create financial freedom.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Valentino Show. You are in for a treat the whole way in from Utah as I get to sit down with my friend, entrepreneur extraordinaire, Steven Scoggins. Thanks so much for joining us.
Are you kidding me? You offered the invite? Of course I'm coming.
I was so glad you said yes, because I think there is so much in your journey of being an entrepreneur that we can unpack and help people. And so I love talking to people that aren't just in their first build, but they've been doing this a really long time, because the life experience that you get in that build and in the growth and all the mistakes that we've all made, I think help a lot of people with the wisdom. So first question out of the gate is, what are some of the things that, if you kind of review 20-year journey, building a big company, what are some of the things that you look back on and you're like, you know what, I'm glad I did this?
I tell you what, I'd like to pivot it just a little bit, because I feel like people learn more from our mistakes
than
we do anything else. And I would say that the greatest mistake I've ever made in building a business, was trying to build a business without building myself. So I got super early on, I was roped into business out of necessity. Part of my backstory is obviously being homeless and then starting a business. In that respect, I needed shelter, I needed food. So I went and found a problem I could solve and tried to solve it. Essentially is kind of what I did. So in doing so, one of the things that I didn't know was that you're gonna have to learn skills along the way. You have to learn how to lead people. And you learn how to hire and fire. You learn how to actually build and watch finances. I was probably in business 10 years before I could actually read a profit and loss statement.
It's actually common.
It's
actually common.
And that unfortunately opened me up in 2017 for a large-scale embezzlement that I went through as well. So I've had a variety of different setbacks along the way, but the primary thing that was at the heart of that was I wasn't focused on building myself. And I'm a big believer in a daily regimen, if you will, of kind of building yourself on a consistent basis. One of the things that I feel like I do that's a little bit unique is I have something called the 8 Pillars of Life. It's a spin on Zig Ziglar's Will of Life.
Okay.
The 8th pillar is contribution. So if you do the other 7 pillars correctly, you'll end up contributing by nature. Okay, so it's kind of like osmosis, but you can have some goals in there. One of the things that I do is I wake up 5:30, prayer, meditate, hit the gym, but on the way to the gym, and part of that recourse, as part of that course of action, is the next 90 minutes of that morning is based on a specific pillar of life, looking at specific thought leadership, a book, a podcast, YouTube, whatever I can get my hands on to continually develop that segment of my life. That regiment, I think, long-term has allowed me to be kind of more well-rounded rather than just consistently focused in one category. Because, in entrepreneurship, especially in early days, it's like all about, what can I build so I can prove that I can build it?
Yes.
Right? A little identity crisis. And the reality is one of the things that I picked up on along the way was the business will never outgrow your conception of the actual infrastructure itself. So if you think you're going to build a small business, you're going to build a small business. If you think you can build a big business, you're going to build a big business. But the why you build the business is a whole lot more important than just building the business itself.
Oh, yeah.
And I find that that 8-pillar philosophy allows me to build myself and avoid me not building myself on a regular basis by giving me balance on a consistent basis.
Can you run through the 8? Do you know them off by heart?
Well, you got financial, obviously, physical, spiritual, emotional, professional, what I call developmental. So that's kind of like getting back into that, right? Obviously, contribution is the 8th one, and the other 2 are escaping my mind at the top of my mind.
I think you had 7 there, so probably grow, something like that. Yeah. So
relationships, relational.
That makes sense. Complete. So you've obviously done great things. You've obviously talked about what you just shared here, which is about building yourself, but you just glossed over something very important that I don't know if the audience caught, because you were once homeless. So tell us about, if you're willing to share, what were the circumstances that created that? How long were you? And then how did you pull out of that? Because obviously you had to have a totally different set of beliefs and mindset to even shift to do anything.
For sure.
Right? Like anything at all, not to build a big company. Like that's like a whole other, that's down the path. But how did you get there? How long were you there? And what in the world did you do in order to get yourself out of that place?
Yeah, for sure. I get the question kind of fairly regularly, because it's like, how'd you go from one to the other, one extreme to the other? The easy answer is pride took me there,
Mm.
and radical transparency got me out of it.
Mm.
But I'll back it up a little bit. So growing up as a kid, my parents were largely dysfunctional. They had their own stuff going on. Dad dealt with alcohol. Mom dealt with what appeared to be mental illness. Obviously, when two non-whole people come together, it creates a mess. Yeah. Leaving my brother and I in the wake, and largely raised at that time by my grandmother. 9 years old, she's diagnosed with cancer. Comes to me and asks me to basically help her. So you picture an average 9-year-old, the mental acuity that's there. I mean, I tell people all the time, I had a G.I. Joe in one hand and Transformer in the other. Mm-hmm. And then she immediately, comes to me and says she's sick. And of course, it's just her. And of course, you look at your grandmother like, I just want to help, right? So she then proceeds to teach me how to basically make meals, everything from cereal to, boiling hot dog. Basically, if you could make it with water or milk, she taught me how to do that. And then I would drag the little, chair away from the table over to the stove, start boiling the water, making food for my brother, who was 3 years younger than me. And then being her crutch. Literally being her crutch as she's kind of going through chemotherapy. And this is back in the mid 80s. So in the mid 80s, as you can imagine, chemotherapy was as detrimental as the actual cancer itself. Yes. Like it was still a very new science, and it's better now. It's still poison, but it's it's better now. Anyway, all that long story short is that led me to a place where when she passed away, my father came back into the picture, and I went to live with him. My brother went to live with my mother, so we were split up as kids. They went to Florida. We stayed in the North Carolina area, which is where I'm originally from. And in that journey, I think he picked me up on a Friday, and I think Saturday morning I was on a construction site carrying studs. Wow. And then pretty much every day, every night, weekend that I wasn't in school was built on the construction site. I was probably 16 years old. I was running framing crews, reading blueprints. It's funny as long as you could read the blueprints, you could actually be the leader, right? Yeah. Which is kind of an interesting thing, because that was like my first real taste of leadership, or trying to develop myself as leadership. Because you have people that were senior to me kind of watching it and responding. But that's when I met the guy that actually ultimately ended up giving me a shot and changing my life. I tell people all the time that one of the things that he did for me was he set the path. So my dad had a business, lost a business in this time frame. And I'll never forget this. He came to me right after he was getting basically the notices of all the the things that happen when you go to shut down and dissolve a business. And he looked at me almost with tears in his eyes, and he says, "Scoggins don't get ahead, they get by." Now, what's important to know about that specific concept is Scoggins, as far back as I can trace, all the way back to Europe, there were not a lot of affluent ones or influential ones. Mm-hmm. So money, resource, all this kind of stuff. We were trained growing up that money was bad and evil, right? So if money's bad and evil, but you're constantly borrowing it from the people that are bad and evil, it was a hot mess. And I say all that to say that when he said that, fortunately, his employer, a guy by the name of Steve Myrick, we call him Old Man Myrick, just not to get too confused, all the Steves, he pulled me off the framing crew one afternoon, put me in his Jeep Grand Cherokee. And of course, I was super excited because it was hot outside. So I was like, air conditioning. AC. Yes, yeah, right. I'm cut off jeans and no shirt and, tan or whatever, tan/red, right? Yeah. And I'll never forget this, because it was the first time I think someone actually paid attention to me. That I wasn't just operating in the background. And when he did that, he put me in the car, and he said, "I got a couple of questions for you." And the first question is, what is the difference between a rich man and a poor man? And, I'm 16, 17 years old. I'm like, well, duh, money. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he was like, absolutely not. It's the way they think. And I was like, okay. Wow. So I tried to let that sit in my spirit. The next question was, I think, more profound. He said, do you want to learn to think like me, or do you want to continue thinking like your father? Whew. Mm-hmm. That actually took balls to say. Yeah. Right? Well, he was a very direct. Sorry, I don't know. I couldn't think of another word to use. That was probably not the best word. Yeah, no, that's spot on though. Yeah, it's spot on. No, he was, it's funny, I'm 5 foot nothing. He was 5 foot nothing. He was a little pit bull of a man. And, in that moment, I remember this like Rolodex happening. And this Rolodex that happened, I was like, I've watched Steve give money repeatedly, $1,000 under a basket of hush puppies because, barbecue's big in North Carolina. And watch a waitress just drop to her knees because she just, was able to just watching awesome stuff like that. He would do it all the time. I also watched him kick police officers off his street because he owned the street.
Wow.
Like he was a very interesting man. But and then I remember, then I was thinking through my father at the time. I'm like, well, he's obviously got some struggles. He's constantly borrowing with no intent to repay. Right. So it's like it's the whole mentality of I get paid on Friday, by Monday it's all gone.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember him saying one time, he said, well, I worked all week, I earned it, I can whatever. And then meanwhile, I watched Steve, and every time Steve made $1, he turned it into 10 through the power of compound and investing and stuff like that. I'm like, I don't know about you, but I like that. And I don't think he's evil. So I go through that scenario of beginning to have some basic level of mentorship. By the time I'm 18 years old, I'm forced to drop out of high school, couldn't pay the bills. So I dropped out of high school, went to work at Golden Corral that led to Waste Industries that then eventually led me back to the construction industry, back with Steve. And when I did that, he came to me and actually gave me my first shot at building a business. He bought me everything that I needed to get started. He was willing to run the entire back office because obviously I didn't know what I was doing. And I did really well for the first year, like really, really well. I was 18, 19 years old, making 6 figures.
That long ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
that
really
was good money.
Yeah.
I started, I bought myself a brand new single wide mobile home because I thought I was the bomb.
Yep.
Right. Bought myself a shiny sports car and all the, the sound systems with the back end with
the bass.
with Tupac and some Dre. And, when that happened, that's where the pride and arrogance started to kind of kick in. Because when I dropped out of high school, I had no slew of people telling me that I was going to be a failure and I was never going to measure up to everything. And I think a part of me was like, watch me, and I think I got lost in watch me for too long because watch me turned into look at me. And once it turned into look at me, as a person of faith, I believe you open yourself up to humbling. And my humbling came in the form of a 5'6" brown-haired, very attractive girl at the time. Went into major debt, trying to buy her all of her whims, and impress, and trying to show that I was valuable, even though now I know that my level of resource doesn't make me valuable.
Right.
My ability to impact lives does. And in doing so, I lost myself. Went into a pretty serious place of depression and anxiety and all kinds of stuff. I literally walked off the job site one afternoon and walked the 6 miles home. Went into the brand new mobile home that wasn't brand new anymore. Walked in the door, shut all the curtains, shut the door, and stayed there in the dark for a while. So much so that I lost the ability to pay for the mobile home because obviously I didn't have an income. So my little brother moves in to assume the monthly payments of the thing that I technically owned on paper. I moved into the smaller bedroom, and sure enough, he had one rule. He's like, "You stop seeing that girl." Like the entire family was like really adamant about it. And long story short is I didn't follow the rules. I got asked to leave, and I did. And I thought, well, I'll show you. I'll show you.
Watch me.
Yeah, watch me. And sure enough, watch me didn't turn into very much. And over the course of the next, probably 4 to 6 months, I was couch surfing. I was in cars, and then all the way to the breaking point of where I literally had no shelter. The important part here is, for me, this is where pride kicks in. I believe pride is a prison. I believe your ego will hold you back from any dream that you can possibly have at your disposal. And at any point in time, I could have picked up the phone and called my father, even though he and I didn't get along great at the time. I could have called him and kind of got myself situated. So fast forward a little further past that experience, I discovered something interesting, and that's that radical transformation only comes from transparency. Until you're authentically transparent with yourself, you will never actually see the wholeness of yourself. You're not going to see your gifts, your talents, and all this kind of stuff. You're going to see yourself in a improper light, in a light that's not consistent with your authentic self. Basically, it's the show me attitude, right? Or I'll show you attitude.
Right. Yeah.
I had something out of the movies one time. They used to have a gym called World's Gym.
Yeah.
Very similar to Goals.
Yeah,
for sure.
Steroid guys. Yeah.
And that was my way of kind of faking it. Because I had a membership at the World's Gym that I had, paid in full like the year prior, and so I started showering there.
So no place to go at
Mhm.
night.
Yep.
Jumping from house to house.
Mhm.
You breezed over until you had no shelter. Were you sleeping on the street at some point, or
In certain
homeless
areas
shelter?
in the rural area, not like in the downtown
Not
city, like
downtown,
under a bridge or nothing like that.
but still nowhere to go at night.
Mhm.
Then when there's finally daylight,
Yep.
you're going down to World's Gym.
Yeah, my thought process is if I didn't get cleaned up, I couldn't get a job.
And are you being naive? Are you about how bad it is in that moment? Or do you still have a persona? Like, are you going
Mhm.
into the gym as if you're there at the gym and you're working out and showering?
It started off that way.
Okay.
And it quickly got to a place where I was just beating myself up on a regular basis.
Mhm.
And I think this is where that catch-22 kind of, not catch-22, that opportunity happens.
Mhm.
The opportunity actually happened when, on the latter side of obviously being in that environment, I go to the girls' gym, and I remember just I was washing my face. I lifted up, I looked in the mirror, and I was like, dude, what the hell are you doing?
Mhm.
You know, I finally had that epiphany of just a year ago. You were given the best opportunity to build a business from scratch with all the support you could have, with
Mhm.
with an access to a multimillionaire on a consistent basis for mentorship, who's willing to pour his energy and his influence into you, and you threw it all away. You threw it all away because you were being foolish,
Mhm.
you know. And in that moment, I started hearing this other quote, this other saying that he used to say to me all the time. And he'd say, Stephen, you have to be willing to do today what others won't, so you can have tomorrow what others don't. And he would say it all the time. And for some, that was like in my head. It was replaying consistently.
Mhm.
Like, and I was like, I just don't. I didn't really know what to do in the moment,
Right.
other
Yeah.
than I had a realization. And that's where that truth about honesty and transparency, and that to me was the granular or the seed of the overall transformation that started. I found my faith a few weeks later.
Mm.
Ironically, my brother invited me to clean his litter box to earn $50 in the mobile home that I had gotten kicked out of. That I
That
technically
you originally
owned,
bought.
that I technically owned on paper
Oh
that
my
he was
gosh.
making the payments on. And that story would take a while to explain. But let's just say that God took me to a place where he humbled me while cleaning up cat crap
Mm.
to get my attention, to give me a second chance.
Mm.
And throughout, I remember this. It was interesting because I remember one of the things I remember praying in that moment, well, after that moment, was, all right, if I am this person that you believe in, because by that time I was kind of atheistic or agnostic because of all the pain and garbage.
Mhm.
If I'm this person, then let me be the one to break all these curses. Let me be the one to kind of like do something with my life. Let me be the person to, you know, I don't know, just have stability. You know, because stability wasn't common.
Right. You didn't have any to that point.
Yeah, and the extended family didn't have a lot of it either.
Yeah.
The extended family was full of alcoholism. The extended family was full of abuse. Like, not from my father to my mother, but my mom suffered quite a bit of abuse growing up. You know, so it was just constant toxicity. There was no influence. There was no manifestation. There was no vibrating at a higher frequency. There was, you know, there was like, I'm surrounded by people who think that life is just something we can sleep through and walk through, and then that's where we're at.
Probably all connected by that, like just survival. Like we just need to survive. We just need to get through the day, the weekend, the week.
Yeah.
And so you're there, you're cleaning out. So just to kind of like unpack for a second. So that moment, you get someone to believe in you, somebody to help you, really help you get off this path. He must have had so much love and compassion for you in your situation, right? So there had to be moments in there that not only did you have the external, what was going on, but the internal dialogue of, I can't believe you screwed this up. And you had probably so much shame and guilt and regret. And
I was beating myself
and beating yourself up in that, right? And so, and maybe there's a point where it's like, okay, maybe that was needed, but you can't stay there.
Yeah.
So the tipping point sounds like when you were cleaning the litter box.
The tipping point was finding my faith, and 2 days later, Steve Myrick, of all people, told my father I could join the framing crew again.
Wow.
Right. So at that time, it was to join the framing crew, it was $12 an hour as a quasi senior carpenter. he used to ride around the neighborhood because he would buy communities, he would develop the land himself. He owned all the trades. He would start the trades, own the trades, and he built he was vertical integrated before it was cool.
Wow.
Right? Just a brilliant little man.
Yeah.
And he lets me back on the framing crew. As he's driving around the neighborhood every day, I'm I'm hiding. I don't want to see him. And then on our first Friday afternoon after being on the framing crew, my father asked me to go next door and reframe a garage door goalpost. So you and I obviously do real estate, so we know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
But for the audience, maybe not as
tell
familiar, it's basically the frame that holds the garage door in place.
Yeah.
Right. And it was crooked, and I had to go basically correct it. When I did that, I went next door, and it just so happens the guys that took over for me doing the siding work, which is what he had me doing, were kvetching, so to speak, of all kinds of he's not paying us. And back in the day, we operate, and they still do this commercial. They operate on a draw schedule.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're familiar with that. So 50% done, 50% pay.
Yep.
Well, these guys were 70% drawn on a 40% completed property.
Oh.
So they were way overdrawn.
Yeah.
And yet they were complaining about not coming the following Monday if they didn't get paid or get whatever. It was clear that they had substance abuse issues of their own.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I had this moment where I finished what I'm working on, but I'm so mad because I'm overhearing. I was like, how, in my spirit, I'm like, how dare they hurt him? And because, he had been crazy generous to me.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And as I'm so fired up, I'm walking walking between house to house, and I'm walking next door. And I remember in my spirit, I what felt like audibly here, wasn't that what you did?
Whew.
And I got wrecked.
I just got chills.
I got wrecked. And again, it goes back to transparency,
mm-hmm.
being honest, being accountable, being responsible, being consistent, right? Being present. And as I walk across the house, my father, he's getting the paychecks for the week, and back in the day, we quote unquote knock off at 2:00, which means on 2:00 on Friday afternoon, we all went home,
mm-hmm.
and we started the early weekend, which then bled into not having money on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my father goes and starts going to get the checks. Well, Steve comes back around. He parks up on the hill in between the two houses to get the checks. So my dad walks across to go get the checks, and he's walking back towards me. I was so mad or so frustrated or so fired up in my spirit that something took over inside of me, and I walked next door back towards Steve. And I had been ashamed.
Mm-hmm.
I had been guilty. I didn't want anything to do with anything. I was avoiding him at all costs.
Yeah.
And this one moment and that one statement that I felt, that changed the game for me. So I walk over to him. I knock on the window. He rolls down the little window. And of course, he's an old country guy. So he says, what can I do you for? How's your head now, boy? And I'm like, it's getting better, because obviously there's our signature language, I guess. He said, well, what can I do for you? I said, well, I was next door, and I heard these guys, and they're saying they're not going to be here Monday, da-da-da-da. Can I please take back over for them if they don't show up? He said, boy, you burned me once. You ain't doing that again. No, that's crazy. Besides, I already sold them all that stuff I bought you. That's their stuff. It's not my stuff anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I understand. But if you give me a second chance, I promise I'll never let you down. Mm. And he was stunned. And he's like, well, look, I can't buy the equipment. I can't do the stuff. And I was like, well, I'll figure it out. A true entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
I'll figure it out. Create something from nothing. Innovate something into thin air. Although that was before I knew what entrepreneurship really was. He reluctantly agreed to allow me to finish the house the guys were working on if they didn't show up by 9 a.m. the following Monday morning. Because you're supposed to be there at 7, but he wanted to give them a little grace. So what did I do? I spent all weekend building all the materials I would need to start the projects with my father, who finally showed up for the first time in my life. He pulls nail guns out of the van that he had at the time. And I said, well, he goes, you got scaffolding to build. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? I know what scaffolds were, but what do you mean build? He said, we're going to start pulling stuff out of the trash piles. We got stuff to build. And we did. We made walkboards. We made the pump jack posts. We did everything, not knowing if those guys were going to be there. Yeah. So I think Entrepreneurship 101 states that you have to be prepared. Mm-hmm. And that goes back to building yourself. You're building yourself. You're better prepared for the opportunities that come your way. And then you got to seize the opportunity. Monday morning, the guys don't show up. Steve's there. I'm sitting on the
Did
curb.
you instinctively know?
Instinctively know which part?
When you got that word and you walked back over to him, was there like something instinctively that you knew those guys weren't showing up?
Oh, yeah.
So you just knew, even though he wasn't there yet, you knew. So you're just, I'm going to lay the track that I need on Monday morning.
Yeah. Think about it this way. A lot of people talk about manifestation. Okay. And I don't believe in manifestation at the core level of I can sit in this chair and I can say, I want a new airplane. 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 I instead believe that manifestation is nothing more than faith fueled by focus. So faith is going to work out, but focused intention to get the job done. So build the thing, do the thing, meet the person, shake the hand, kiss the baby, make the website, build the funnel, create the email sequence, do the work. So it actually happens, right? Yeah. And I believe that manifestation comes by faith and focus. So that's kind of my 2 cents on manifestation. In this particular case, what happened is obviously the guys didn't show up, but I was on the curb ready and prepared. I spent the entire weekend getting prepared. I spent my entire paycheck of $176 on renting a brake machine, which is a device used to make fascia trim, basically, for the audience. And when I did that, I didn't know. It was faith, but I was focused on what I was going to try to get accomplished. Guys don't show up Monday. 9 a.m., 9:06, he rolls around and says, boy, what you waiting on? That became the first house that I did of the business I was just telling you about off air.
Oh, wow.
That is in multiple states, has employed 1099s included, upwards of 400 people.
Wow.
Provided for all the financial resources and capital that you saw with our live event facility that you got to speak on stage a couple of times. That's the beginning. So when I say I started out of necessity, with the intent on doing something. What I didn't fully realize is, and this is something, it's just another thing that happened in my little heart. In my heart, one of the things I heard was, one day I'll call you out of this. I have no idea what that meant. So every 5 years, I'll be like, can I go now? Can I go now? Can I go now? It's hot out here. I've been driving nails for a while. It's hot. And now, 20 plus years in, 25 years in with that specific business, I look at what I believe. Again, I'm a person of faith. What I believe God has put in front of me. I'm now able to join people on stage and speak. I'm now able to write books. I'm able to create content, live events, which, our good friend Ed Milet did his book launch at our place. And, it was really cool because that was when I realized that I actually enjoyed doing live events for other people other than myself. Yeah. And at the end of the day, what I discovered was until you put your hands to work, your head's not going to really get started. And then your heart's not going to come by either. So I like to say that the construction business taught me how to use my hands, which then strategically taught me to use my head, which now I get to use my heart. And I feel like when you can make a heart-body connection with a focused influence behind it, you can do pretty much anything.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's so beautiful about that is that house that you did with the brake machine that you bought with every dollar that you had. Oh, rented. I was going to say, they must have been not as expensive back then. So you rented that. You had scaffolding built. You had all the supplies. And that was the first house that you've done in the company that you've had for 25 years? 25 years.
In 2022, that company did just under 82 million, just under 80 million.
80 million. And that, to me, it's to make me a little emotional. That, to me, wasn't just about you wanting to prove that you were an entrepreneur or that you could be successful or that you could do it. Watch me. It was more about you were trying to be congruent to be the person who's has integrity to keep his word. Yeah. Like, to me, what I felt was that no matter what, you were not going to make Steve feel the way that you made him feel that first time. And I think what's so beautiful is oftentimes maybe people that are watching maybe they have a parent or something like that they've had that connection with, and you didn't have that gift, but God gave you a different type of gift with someone who is not blood related to you, that does not share your DNA, but cared enough about you as a human to try to call you up out of such a dark place. And I think that's such a beautiful thing.
I think that those mentors are all around us. I mean, you know the old adage as much as I do. When the student is ready, the mentor appears. Yes. Kind of scenario. I actually think that's a life truth. Yeah. But I also think it's only life truth if your head's not aimed at the floor. Yes. You got to pick your head up. You got to start again. I've had in business. I've had all kinds of quote unquote successes or wins. I've had moments, but where I thought I was going to lose everything, and sometimes they were in the same week. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
You know what I'm saying?
I always say entrepreneurship is like knowing exactly what you want and having no clue what you're doing all within 5 minutes of each other.
Exactly. But that's where the entrepreneur comes in, right? The
Yes.
entrepreneur is the creator. That's one of the things I think I love about entrepreneurs, right? Is real. So first of all, real entrepreneurs, when they look another entrepreneur in the eyes, they know it.
They know.
They don't you can tell when someone's an entrepreneur.
There's a
and
lot of
someone's
them.
an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And some of that you can do through discipline. Some of that you can do through diligence, how diligent they are, not just the discipline of what they do, but the intent in which they go after that objective. And I also think that entrepreneurs, this is why I love them so much, is especially in the early days are gunslingers.
Oh yeah.
You know, and one of the programs that we have is called Unstoppable Startup, and one of the first things I try to teach entrepreneurs is to understand where you are in your season. Not like spring, fall, and whatever, but
Build.
so to me, there's 5 phases in building a business. Startup is hustle and grind, make something out of thin air. It's building the scaffolding out of the trash piles. It's, spending your last dime to get started. It's throwing that big risk and going at it. And then there's the testing phase. Okay, so startup phase 1, testing phase 2. Is this working for me? Is my product right? Is my solution right? Am I making money? Am I not making money? Am I burning the candle at both ends? So I need to hire somebody. What is at the core of it? And then it's in investing. So now you got a framework. You got a business that you started. You've got a pretty good roadmap that this is working. All right, now you have to figure out what you're going to invest in. Is it an ERP system for production suites? Is it accounting? Like what is it? Like what are you going to invest in next?
Yeah, more
How
people.
People like resources, trucks, equipment for service-based businesses. It might be your first computer if you're a digital marketer, like coming out of the gate, right? But you're investing in yourself. One of the things that I've told entrepreneurs before is it's really interesting to me because real entrepreneurs continually invest in themselves and their businesses long before they ever take their first big distribution, right? And that's where I think a lot of entrepreneurs get really in trouble. Hey, I made a bunch of money this year. Yep. Well, experience has already taught me that next year's not guaranteed.
That's right.
I have to make next year guaranteed, or I have to work towards that goal.
So important to know when to start pulling money out of your business. Yep. Because I know everyone's like, and it is true, like become profitable, pull money out of your business, create additional assets. Yep. But like if you do that at the wrong time, you can actually stifle the growth of where your business trajectory could be going.
Put the whole baby in jeopardy.
Yeah. And then it's not sustainable. Yeah. What is some of the things, obviously, going from 8 million to 80 million that you found I had to do these things, whether it was yourself, business related? Like, what are some of the things that you were like, if you look back from 80 to 8, what are some of the things that you did completely different than when you went from 0 to 8?
How I viewed money. How I viewed money is probably the one of the biggest ones. And it goes all the way back to Steve Meyer's concept of rich man versus poor man. So when he said rich man and poor man, he's talking wealth. He's not talking just money. Okay, wealth in your relationships, wealth in your finance, wealth in your overall emotional well-being, wealth, like true wealth. Like true wealth is not $1. And when I was at the $8 million mark, it was all about how much I could earn. How could I raise revenue in such a way and decrease cost to increase my margin? So that was great. In and of itself. But then what did I do with the increase in margin in the cash? Did I go out and buy a new toy? Did I invest in an ERP system? Did I invest in a real estate asset that's going to pay me longer term dividends longer term? Most of the resource that I have currently coming in comes from passive means, not active means. And
which is where it's at.
And at the $8 million mark, I still very much, if I go back to those 5 phases, the after investing is scaling and then selling. Selling or operating, you get to choose, right? You build it big enough that you can do what you want. But one of the core differences in that trajectory, in that 8 to 80 million, for example, is what am I doing with that resource? At 8 million, I was taking quite a bit off the table. A little bit here, there, a little bit there. I probably wasn't as strategic as I probably could have been. Like I could have probably taken 100,000 and put it in a piece of real estate to build wealth rather than to go shopping. Right.
Well, I think that's when you come from poverty. When you come from poverty, those first few milestones are so significant because you have no data of
Yeah.
life experience to know anybody that's been there.
Yep.
So I think what's difficult is when you're first.
Yeah.
When you're first in your family, first in your friend
Yep.
group, first in your community, it is so hard to have the discernment of what to do, which is why it's so critical to read great books,
Yep.
be around great
Yep.
things, great people that have that experience. Because otherwise, I see people, they'll do $1 million, $3 million, $5 million, 8, and then all of a sudden they go from 8 back to 3 or flatline. But often I've seen the data will support too that they typically go down because they're either pulling cash out, they're spending it frivolously, or they didn't build a sustainable base in their company in order to try to go to 12, 20, or 80 million.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important distinction, because what the change was is when I started looking at resource, how can I compound? Everything's about how I compound. How can I do what Steve did? How can I turn 1 into 10? 1 into 5, 1 into 4. One of my internal mantras is I never invest in anything that won't give me a 3x return minimum. 3x is my baseline.
How do you handle all of the and I'd be curious if you're willing to share if you've done any of it, but all of these new fancy things that come along from people with funds and trying to raise capital for this and invest in this business and buy this NFT. How do you navigate? How have you navigated through some of those things?
Well, step one is
we have a lot of friends that have lost a lot of money in the last few years.
Yeah, you and I both have friends that have done that.
Yeah.
They kick themselves. So first of all, I only deal in stuff that I know. I know housing.
Please, I want everyone to get that.
Yep.
Only deal in things you know. This is where I think everybody misses the mark.
Yeah.
They think that they're going to have a better return or greater multiple or some shorter investment cycle if they go do this other thing that they have no business participating in. I only know a few things.
Yep.
I try to stick with those few things, real estate and businesses. And any other time I have tried to go outside of that, it has been massively painful. I sat across somebody, I actually cannot remember who it was, but he was talking about flipping. He was doing tens of millions of dollars in flips, and then all of a sudden somebody thought that he could start buying notes, mortgage notes for 10 cents on a dollar.
Oh gosh.
Saw a larger return, went and did it, went bankrupt. I think he was like 3 million in debt or something after that, and was just sharing, like he said, the exact same thing. Stick with what you know. If somebody can't explain it to me very simply, and I have to have this whole deck and all, I'm like, nope, I'm out. And maybe I miss out on things, but when you're the one, right? But I think when you're first, and when you're the one in your family that has kind of built wealth, it's like you don't have someone to fall back on. If all of a sudden this goes sideways. So to me, if you can't explain it to me, just like we're talking, what's the return? Like when we start getting into too much data, I'm like, nah, I'm not saying it won't work, but it's just not for me. And have you used that as a navigation tool?
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. So something that I am not schooled in is Tom and Lisa obviously deal in a lot of digital currencies.
Yes.
It's not my world.
Me either.
But Tom will go study his butt off to understand what he's doing.
Yes.
And I think long term he'll be fine. Like he's already fine. Don't get me wrong, but he'll. But that's his niche. Right. I understand how a property is actually built from the ground up. Therefore, I understand this is my second key. What can I influence to increase the value?
Yes.
So the facility that we did the live event, when I first bought it, it was a $2 million property. Okay. It's had a 3x return. Because of the improvements I did to the property, they cost me 1/10 or 1/20th of the investment. So if I identify what I know, and then the next step is how can I influence increase in value? Now I've got something. And then to me, now it's the time span.
Yeah.
Is this going to be something I'm going to buy and hold? Is this going to be something I'm going to buy and flip, buy and sell? I'm weird. I don't do debt. So I typically buy properties, with the exception of a commercial building. That was my first time at debt in a while, in cash or the equivalent of cash, basically. And I've done that because I want to get the full rent return. But I also want to get the full appreciation of the asset. So I would rather do that slower than buy 15 properties, the cash flow in $300 a piece, and then the market tanks, and then your renters leave, and your occupancy drops, and the next thing you know, you're in trouble.
It's so important to talk about because I don't feel we don't share that enough, right? Like I know people that did way better than me in certain markets. I also know people that were was over leveraged when 2008 happened,
Mhm.
and they committed suicide
Yeah.
because they could not pay all of their loans and everything shipped. And I just think that when we look back at 40 years of data, there's always something. It was the savings and loan crisis in the late 90s.
Yeah.
It was, even when 9/11 happened, there was some
Yeah.
uncertainty in the market. Then you've got 2008.
Yeah.
There's always these pockets that are unpredictable. We can't explain it. And even the smartest person in the world can't fully see
Yeah.
it coming. So for me, like the Bitcoin and all of the cyber currencies and stuff, I think it's great.
I'm a Buffett guy. He's like, hard asset, please.
Yes, yes. Because to me, can you make money? Sure. But the time that it would take to learn that in order for me to make an intelligent decision with my money on it, I'd rather just stick with what I know. So I think everyone that's listening, hear what we're saying. Like, could you go learn something else? Yes. But is it easier and faster to double down with what you already know?
I mean, it's
so.
worked for me.
Yeah.
It's worked for me. I'm in a good place in life. I have freedoms that other people don't have, but I also was on the other side of that where I had a lot of I didn't have a lot of freedom.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that kills investors and entrepreneurs that simultaneously, and some of them are obviously one and the same, but is impatience. Impatience. I think trying to go too far, too fast, without counting the cost and actually going through a proper risk evaluation. Because people are like, well, my risk is, I can't pay back the note. Well, is that really just your risk? What about your reputation?
Yeah.
Like, what about the relationships in the maybe because maybe you're involved in a deal with a friend who's been a friend for 20 years, and then you see what I'm saying? There's other risks than just the financial risk.
Mm-hmm.
There's legal risk, there's relationship risk, there's reputational risk, there's all these different segments, and a lot of entrepreneurs are all upside.
Yeah.
So I'll say this. One of the things that Steve Myrick told me that kept me out of the trouble in 2008, that actually allowed my construction business to sequential in size in 2009 and beyond. That was like the thing, was being debt free.
Yep.
Okay, so everything that I had in the business at that time was paid for. It doesn't mean I didn't sell some stuff off going into that season.
Sure.
It was, call it instinct, call it whatever. Steve Myrick told me a long time ago. He said that the bear is always chasing the bull, and the bull is always poking the bear. All right, so people are familiar with bull markets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everything's amazing. Everything's
we just came
let's
out
go!
of. Yeah, right.
Right? And you got the bear market. Oh my God, the world's coming to an end. Don't freak out, He's like, you need balance.
Yes.
When you're in the bull market, you need to be prepared for the bear market, and when you're in the bear market, you need to be getting yourself prepared for the bull market.
Yes.
So a wealth principle. I know you love this, and I know a lot of our friends are kind of on the same thing. A lot of us made most of our money in downturns.
Yeah.
Okay. A core principle of that is we stay out of fear because we stay consistent. A consistent approach will always outperform a roller coaster approach when you look at the highs and lows. A bull market is there to help you get going. Maybe you can get capital a little bit cheaper depending on what's going on. There's a lot of pluses in a bull market, but if you get too excited about the bull market, you think, "Oh my God, I made $10 million this year. We're off to the races. We can invest over here and invest over here. I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna dabble in this. I'm gonna dabble in that." And now you got diluted focus and our mutual friend Rory.
He's such a great quote.
Oh yeah,
Everyone
diluted focus,
that.
diluted results. That's like a testament. Take the stairs all day long. You open yourself up to unneeded risk because you're being impatient. You're not being consistent. You're not paying attention. You're not watching out for the tea leaves.
Mm-hmm.
You're not looking at your financials as much as you used to. I was talking to a good friend of mine that's starting a retail store in the middle of a shopping center. Okay, nice mall, got a good rate on rent. Okay, great. I said, well, what is your daily close like? What do you mean? Well, at the end of the day, you tally up your receipts, how much revenue you made, so we can back our way into your costs. We can make sure you're making enough margin. All right. Well, what does your weekly close look like? Monthly?
Right. They just look.
Well, we're like 2 months behind, but we have money coming in. I'm like, yeah, but are you watching how much money's going out? I've seen people be crazy sales successful and crazy finance poor.
Yes.
Like so many people are coming in the front of the gate, but they're not being serviced properly, and they fall out the back of the gate.
Oh my gosh, happens all day long. That's why 97% of all businesses, 97% of all businesses will eventually close.
Yep.
Because you get this one great thing, or you think this is so awesome. And I always say, when you start to have those feelings, that should be your indication to pause for a
Yeah.
second. When something seems to be so great or so good and you are ignoring, at least for me, anytime I did that, it was painful, whether it was a person, a project, a business, anything.
Yeah.
It's like when you get too excited about something, just teach yourself to have the discernment and the discipline to just pause for a moment and start to look at, I always say, business is very simple. It's analysis, capital, and action. Like analyze the finances, make sure that it's going to be able for you to use your capital in it. And then you have to take action, whether it's to avoid it or to go all in, because our brains cannot process what we can gain or what we can lose down the road. It only processes what we're losing right at this moment. So I think that's so important for people to get. So I love that you shared that.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, in a down economy, those that have capital are buying everything that's being sold at fire sale. So a property that would have been, I don't know, use a random number, $500,000 is now getting sold for $350,000. Well, great, I'm paying $350 because in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, 4 years' time, like it'll be $700,000. It's just, it's patience, it's strategy. You mentioned obviously kind of like counting the cost. Like most people won't do enough diligence to even find the data to look at to count the cost.
Right. Well, because they don't really, there are a lot of people that really don't want to know. They would rather just go in because that feels a lot better than actually understand. I always say it's like the interest rates. Like everybody is up in arms about the interest rates. This is a very unpopular opinion, but I actually don't think it's negatively that bad because what happens when you're at 2 or 3%, which people were doing for a very long time, they are buying the house at the top part. If the bank says you can buy 500, what are they doing? They're trying to get 510,
515,
exactly,
520.
right? As opposed to now you can't buy a house that's at that much. We know that at least in an election cycle, probably this coming year, 2024,
I'm thinking 3 basis points down.
At least, I would think. So that's going to translate a little bit to mortgage. And when we actually pulled this data, I don't care who you like in the White House or not, every single election cycle, the quarter during and before and during the election always drops down a few points. I wonder why, right? So, and this again is not political because it doesn't matter. This is if it was Republican or Democrat in the House, it did not matter. So it's absolute data and math. So we know this is going to happen. When you buy a house, now all of a sudden you can't qualify for 500. Now you're qualifying for 275. Now you're getting that. Well, guess what? Then you can go refi that rate. And now you're in a house that you can pick up more equity and appreciation in, as opposed to being
the value add I was mentioning
before.
Like, what value can you do to increase the value?
That's
compounding. If I invest $50,000 in a moderate makeover of a home, let's say it's built in the 90s, that's going to give me a $200,000 return.
Right.
So my net pickup is 150 grand.
But it's because you know your numbers, you know construction, and you know how. So what happens, I think, is a lot of people in any audience hear that. And they're like, oh, I'm going to go flip a house because Steve made money flipping a house. And then they go do it. But they don't have the data. They didn't do the research. They didn't understand the market. And then if you don't have your own contractors or you're not a little handy, you will go through so much more capital on that reno than you will if you're moderately this or your brother can do that or right. I mean, there's a lot more to pick up.
It's what we call the stupid tax.
I know. And it breaks my heart that people don't think of that and they're getting pieces of clickbait information on the internet and then they're going in and there's a lot of people in they're having financial challenges right now.
If you stick with what you know, great, you can start building and compounding. If there's a segment you want to get into, you just need to learn the information to know what you need to know to enter into the segment. Right? I learned construction from the inside out. It's taught me the core. I think in all my businesses, I always use a cost plus scenario. Like when I was building out some of the digital platforms and stuff that we've got, right? Okay, it's going to cost me X number of dollars, but it's not just the website. It's the automation sequences. It's the team I'm delegating to, like to figure out what my hard costs are, hard and soft costs. Once I understand my hard and my soft cost, now I have a basic overview of what the cost is, and now I can adjust and play with some margins. I think that has served me in pretty much every business segment that I've been in, is just knowing your cost. You know, the Bible even tells you to count your cost before you build. Like 2,000 years plus ago.
I know, right? It's got some great wisdom in there. So anyway. I love that. So entrepreneurs that are listening, they're wanting, whether it's investing or they have a business, what are some of the things that you have found in this last season of your build that you're like, you know what, this is what worked really well for us, whether it's marketing, operations, you pick something that you're like, this is what we did really well, and maybe there's another thing that you wish you wouldn't have done.
All right, so this is going to be super granular and tactical.
Okay. They love this.
Super granular and tactical. I think of all the business I've had, to give you an idea, I've in my business career, construction obviously is a large one. Real estate was kind of a no-brainer over time. I'm now in the digital space, like not currency, but in building digital products and courses and stuff like that, speaking and all that kind of stuff. So I have a pretty wide variety I've done some retail, I've done pretty wide variety. When I look at all of those business segments, a buddy of mine that I shared this, what I'm about to share with you, said before, that doesn't work for every segment. I said, you tell me a segment it doesn't work for. There are 5 drivers of any business, okay? Driver number 1 is ideation, okay? What are you doing? How are you doing it? What problem are you solving? How is somebody willing to pay you to solve that problem? What is your mission, your vision, your core values? Like, it's the entire, like, who do you want to be when you grow up? And I think you need to get as clarified on that as you possibly can before you take the next step, okay? The next driver is sales, okay? What are you selling? How are you selling it? Is it over the phone? Is it via website? Is it handshake? Is it like how, who, what, when, where, how? Like, if you just answer those questions for sales by itself, you're going to set yourself up, okay? Now, obviously, in my methodology, the sales bucket would also have count the cost for me.
Good, yeah.
The third one is fulfillment. How are you going to deliver this product, good, or service with absolute excellence, day in and day out consistently, okay? So we know what we're doing. We know how we're going to do it. Now we know how we're going to deliver it. Now I can count on the financial resource, which is the next driver, which is finance, okay? Learn how to read a P&L, income statement, balance sheet. I'm telling you right now, I lost millions of dollars not being able to read a stupid document, right? So I've spent some time there. When you understand your finances, you're able to make informed decisions on the other aspects of the business and the drivers, okay?
Speaking my language.
Right? The 5th driver is rating fan retention. Like, when Candy comes and speaks at our venue, when she goes back to Arizona, does she say, I just spoke at the most incredible venue. It was so freaking cool. Like, what kind of experience can you offer your clients? Sometimes it's in the form of gratitude. Sometimes it's in the form of affiliate programs. Sometimes it's in the form of referral bonuses. Sometimes it's just sending a birthday card or something like that. And you can automate that stuff now. Yeah. Right? I'm a big believer in automate, delegate, and eliminate. Big believer. Amen. Those 5 drivers, if you routinely optimize them every year, all right, how are we going to make this tighter? 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 To me, that is the definition of scaling. Okay? All right, my vision needs to be clear. We need a new product lane. We're adding a new revenue source. Understand the cost structure, blah, blah, blah. Okay? Great. How are we going to sell it? Oh, well, we're going to have an outside sales team now. Okay, well, where's that coming from? Who are we hiring? How are we training them? Where are they coming from? Right? Okay, well, now we sold it. Now we got to deliver it. Like in a coaching aspect, it's like, who's going to show up for the call? Right. Like who's going to run the call? Exactly. Who's going to add the graph? I mean, there's like a bazillion things. Yeah, but no matter what industry you're looking at, you're following that framework. That's right. And again, if you go year after year after year, I think personally, this is my experience, if you would just set the intention going into the new year every year of optimizing those 5 aspects, tying that directly to a forecasted budget, right? So what revenue you plan on creating, what cost, like look at your CapEx expenditures, which is obviously capital you need to invest in other places. When you look at all 5 of those drivers and you just do that consistently and then measure that on a quarterly basis, how are we doing in these categories with our priorities, right? What priorities are going to give you the biggest lift? It's pretty simple. When you do that, you will look back 10 years from now and it won't be a $5 million business. It'll be a $50 million business. My experience, it doesn't matter what lane it is. It could be real estate. It could be service. It could be retail. If you follow those 5 drivers on a consistent basis and just watch them, optimize, you will look back and you will have built, as I did, from a GED kid, that's the extent of my education, to now 8 figures plus in one category alone. You'll build something pretty amazing, and all this accolades and aspiration, all this stuff that you want along the way to make yourself feel important. By the time you get to the end of further along the journey, you realize it's irrelevant, right? Steve Meyer today, people hear his name because he changed my life numerous times in numerous ways. Okay, he actually created a legacy that outlived him through me, and now I'm doing the same thing for other people. to the best of my ability.
Mm-hmm.
And my ultimate goal is to be Steve Meyer to as many humanly people as I
Mm-hmm.
possibly can on this earth. The intent was to build a business, but the outcome was to change lives.
Mm.
And I think that every single business can do that. I actually believe that every single business, if done well, is a personal development company masquerading as whatever your niche is.
Mm-hmm.
Retail, real estate, whatever. Are you willing to get after it?
Mm.
But not for selfish gain,
Yeah.
but as a heart of service. Like, if you'll do that, people will pay you big money to solve their problems on a consistent basis because you do it with absolute excellence, and they know they can trust you. The one thing missing in the marketplace more than anything else, from my perspective right now, is trust.
Mm.
Way too many gurus, not enough guides.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Right? Which is why I love you so much, because that's exactly
Mm-hmm.
what you don't have to do any of this stuff. You don't.
No.
You're good. You're happy.
Yeah.
You know?
But I think that's what makes it, like, I was just talking with Jamie Kern-Lehman, and she was saying how,
I
like,
love her, by the way.
she's amazing. We were just saying, you know, she was working, building It Cosmetics, 100-hour weeks and doing all this crazy stuff. And now here she is with this book and
Mm-hmm.
donating all of the proceeds of the book, which I did
Mhm.
as well. And like, but still showing up, still
Yep.
putting in the hours, you know, like I told you, I was doing eight different episodes today.
Yeah.
Like, not because we don't make a dime off of this. It
Yeah.
actually costs money to produce.
Right.
But to
Yeah.
me, it's like, if you can take your experience, and I think this is where a lot of people miss in the beginning, in the
Yeah.
building years, because they really do think, if I get to 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures, 9, if I build a unicorn, if I take it public, if I do an IPO,
I'll be
then
happy.
I'll be
Yeah.
happy.
Yeah.
And I think that it's, until you have the life data to support that in every single one of those accolades that you get, that you're not going to feel the fulfillment. And I know some people might, well, that's really great. You guys have all this level of success to say that, but I can barely pay my bills. If you start to look at it, so have I.
Mm-hmm.
If you start to look at that as not something that you are trying to achieve in order to fill some void,
Mm-hmm.
but that you already are whole and
Yep.
you're filled, and you're still going to achieve and grow so that you can help more people, it shifts.
Yep.
I think how you show up and why you show up and how you can outrun, outlast, and
For sure.
outsurvive anybody in your industry.
100%.
You know, and I think anytime I've had challenge, it's like I've almost forgot that.
Yeah.
I've almost like got so buried in what I needed to do that I kind of forgot sometimes of why I was doing
Mhm.
it. And man, that's painful.
Yeah.
When you remember why you're doing something, there's just a whole other level of how you show up in life.
Well, and the reality is the most successful businesses on the planet did one thing. They all have one thing in common. They solve a problem.
Yeah.
Like, somebody needs a house. Great.
Yep.
I'm going to buy that one. I'm going to make it nice, and I'm going to sell it to a family.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to rent it to a family that's in need. Like, we way overcomplicate business when, if you look at business from an aspect of service, the sacrifices that you pay along the way are not a big deal,
Mm-hmm.
right? I don't know. It's just, it's changing the overall mindset of how you are actually pursuing your endeavor. You know, I remember this one time I had bought when I was building my business, the first one, I was probably 5 years in. I finally got in a place where I had some liquidity. Like, you know, I've always used the rule, I'm going to live on 50% of my income,
Mhm.
which is now like 20%. Because
Mhm.
now
Yep.
it's like, what can I do? Compound. But when I was doing that, one of the competitors that I had in the marketplace, like, he was big into jewelry, gold chains and nice watches and whatever. And he told me one day, watches, you're never going to have, you know, kind of like just bragging.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I spent the next 24 months trying to earn my way to getting that watch.
Oh.
And then I bought the stupid thing.
Mm.
Then I bought the thing, and it supposedly has a crystal bezel, which is not supposed to be shatterproof. It falls off the counter, shatters the bezel. It cost me another $2,000 to fix the watch.
Wow.
And I was like, that actually taught me a lesson. It was like, this stuff is completely unimportant.
Yeah.
It's nice to enjoy when you're
Yep.
ready and you're available. But I prefer, at this stage in the game, I prefer to own things and not let things own me.
Yes.
I have a
Ooh,
zero
good.
problem selling stuff, getting rid of stuff. I just don't have that problem.
Yeah. So good. I love it. And honestly, like, unless you have a multi-million-dollar net worth,
Mm-hmm.
you shouldn't really be dabbling in any
Yeah.
of those things. You
It's a
should
small
just be trying to
percentage.
stack cash.
Yeah.
Like, to me, like, I didn't buy fancy things
Yep.
when I had absolutely the right to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd certainly, still had like a pair of shoes and a nice car,
Yeah.
but like the level that I could have spent and can spend,
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
Because to me, when I always view money as like these little soldiers that go out and like they multiply.
Yeah.
And so when these little soldiers go out, like I want to deploy them into something that is going to make more of them,
Yeah.
or is going to have an impact in
Yep.
a charity and a
Yep.
nonprofit to be able to bless a lot of people. And that doesn't mean I don't do it, but I just don't do it to the level because I've done it and it's not there. Like I've
Yeah.
driven one time in my life a brand new car off the lot, and it's like for a week.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all of that work
And
for
the first
1
time you eat
week
fries,
of a
and you smell
feeling.
fries.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's important if people just change the narrative
Yeah.
of what success really is about. I think
Yeah.
that we would have a lot happier people.
What if the definition of success was about impact? How
Yeah.
much impact did you make?
Right. And it still goes back to, like, I know there are a lot of people who say, oh, I just want to impact people. But if you're broke, you can't impact a lot of people. Right? Like if you're not successful.
I mean, maybe financially, but
Right. Financially.
I've had many broke people give me wisdom that I needed. Like maybe they had a really strong marriage.
Oh yeah, that's true.
you know,
Yeah, I was
and-
thinking
but-
financial. That's so true.
Yeah. So I forgot which. It's a famous author of some kind. I'm gonna butcher the quote, but essentially, is that every person is superior to me in some way.
Mm.
In other words, there's something valuable that anyone can add if you open yourself up to it.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I'm gonna take financial advice from somebody
Right,
who doesn't have resources.
right. Yeah. But I'm also, on the other hand, not going to take marriage advice from someone that's never been.
Yeah.
Right. So it
Or done
works
it
the same way.
successfully.
Yeah. Right. So it works both ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, to me, it's more of like, I always say, like, you can have a really big impact because if you're a kind, caring, generous person when you have a little, that's only going to be amplified when you have a lot.
Yep.
And so just from obviously the nonprofit world, like when people don't have a lot of money, it's hard to donate $5 or
Yeah.
$10 or $50. And so it's hard to make an impact in a big way. But if
Yeah.
you link your success up to your point to creating more of an impact,
Yeah.
as you continue to make more money, you will do better things with it than buy the watch or the boat.
The one wish I wish I could do right now, and I know we're running short on time now, but the one wish I have is I wish Steve Myrick could have seen what his investment in me became, and to see that I've worked really hard to be a good steward of it.
He's passed?
He passed in 2003.
Oh, wow. And here you are 20 years later still talking about him.
Yeah.
What an impact he's had in your life. And what a gift
Yeah.
of grace that you were given at some time. It's just such a beautiful thing that happened. And here you are still keeping
Yeah.
his name alive.
For
in
sure.
the
Well,
world.
and think about this, okay? And this is something I'll kind of leave it here a little bit. Your best time to receive grace is when it's not earned, right?
Ooh, that's good.
It's when your heart is pure-ish, meaning your intent is pure. Maybe not, maybe you got a lot of past drama and baggage that you'll work through over time, but your intent. My intent when I asked Steve for a second chance was not to take advantage of him.
Yeah.
My intent was not to let him down.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he sensed that, and because of that, allowed for grace to occur. He didn't owe me anything. There was no logical reason for him to give me a second chance, but he chose to. So grace is only grace when it's unearned.
So good. One final question. We talk a lot about business, money, wealth. What does wealth mean to you at this stage in your life?
Oh, that's such a good question. Wealth not properly stewarded is a complete waste. One of the commitments I've made to myself is if I can afford to buy a second, third, or fourth home, then I better be able to give in equal manner. So, I'm very blessed to have some nice things now, but I'm also blessed to also be able to give some nice things now. And to me, they need to be balanced. And I think the more successful you become over time, and the more passive streams or compounding you've already, because you laid the groundwork for compounding 5 years before it actually happens. A lot of times before you ever see it. But when you've done that successfully for a number of years, you're going to have more resource in some cases than you really know what to do with. Right? What are you going to do with that resource? What impact can you make? One of the things that obviously you and I share a passion for is like, how do we help the old versions of us?
Yeah.
Like, how do I go find the GED kid who's got an entrepreneurial brain and has no idea it exists?
Yeah.
Like he or she sees in strategies, right? But they're flunking out of school.
Yeah.
You know, that's how do we do that? And I think for me, wealth is only wealth if it's stewarded towards the impact and towards the grand scheme, the grander plan, I guess. I don't know. It's a weird kind of vibe, but wealth is not money. Wealth is not stuff. Wealth is not things. Wealth is not, there's an element to freedom to it, but wealth is only wealth if it's used to help other people.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. It's such a beautiful story of who you were, how grace entered your life, just your whole journey to becoming who you are now, and seeing all the successes, and how so many people get to this point and they start to take all the credit and have a big ego. And I just think it's so beautiful that you still look back and thank that guy for giving you a second chance.
I'm sure you got mentors in your pipeline.
Oh yeah,
too.
Absolutely. Yeah. So tell us, where can they find you, whether it's socials, website?
Yeah. Oh, it'd be my pleasure. Probably easiest to just go to StephenScoggins.com.
Okay.
That's with a PH and 2 G's in Scoggins. So
perfect.
StephenScoggins.com. You can find me at Stephen_Scoggins on Instagram. I'm probably most active there personally. Okay. So check us out there. We've got some cool things coming down the pipeline. We're not releasing to the public just yet, but it's coming.
Awesome. So give him a follow. Check out his website. You've got that awesome startup program as well. So thanks again for being here. I really enjoyed this time with you.
Always my pleasure.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to this episode. And if there was something that you loved or you had a specific takeaway, share it and tag me at Candy Valentino. And if you haven't yet, grab your copy of Wealth Habits everywhere books are sold. And for upcoming events or ways to stay connected, head over to candyvalentino.com. That's all for today. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. We'll see you next time.